Now, funny thing you mentioned about the Earth 2 Green Lantern, Alan Scott.
Hmm.
Even when the opportunity presented itself for Batman Black and White, you
Hmm.
created a connection between Batman and the Green Lantern that went a bit back before Bruce Wayne became Batman. And that was a very touching panel, if I might say.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, again, it was a story that I wanted to see. I after DC merged all the Earths into this one. Um, I thought, well, okay, so Green Lantern was in Gotham City in the 40s. Batman is in Gotham City now. When did they meet? And I waited for somebody to do that story until finally Mark Chiarello called me up and said, "Hey, how do you like to do a Batman Black and White?" And I said, "Oh yeah, I have just the story."
And you would be paired with Jose Luis Garcia Lopez.
Oh, I was paired, but it was a long. It started out. Um, it started out. Mark offered it to Gil Kane, and I thought, oh my God, to have Gil Kane draw Alan Scott and Batman together, are died and gone to heaven. Unfortunately, the one who died and gone and went to heaven was Gil Kane. So it wound up then coming back, and he sent it to Dave Gibbons, I think,
Okay.
and it sat on his desk for, I don't know, 7 months, 8 months, something like that, until he
Wow.
finally said, "Oh, I'm not going to have time to do this," and then he gave it to Jose Garcia Lopez, and Jose did a great job. I have to confess, I really wish it had been Gil Kane, but Jose, you just can't fault the artwork. And he had such a challenge because it was an 8-page story, and I
Yeah.
was trying to tell basically a 22-page story in 8 pages. If I'd been able to, I would have loved to have been able to do it as a color comic book in one 22-page story. But I had 8 pages. Plus, he was doing it in black and white, so he just did a fabulous job, and I was very happy with it.
For an 80s kid like myself, this story was a dream come true because uh, for my generation, we grew up on Jose Luis's artwork.
Mm-hmm.
Because anywhere we could find the merchandise or anywhere we would find the poster or anything that would be about DC Comics, it would mostly be
Mm-hmm.
having Jose Lopez,
Mm-hmm.
the artwork. And to see you as the writer and him being the artist, and then you touched upon a very emotional aspect, if you will, Batman's superhero, if you will,
Mm-hmm.
Bruce
Mm-hmm.
Wayne's childhood superhero. That really was, how should I say, uh, I really felt happy when I read that, because the last time I came across was when I was reading Batman Hush, and
Mm-hmm.
Jeff Loeb actually made a reference that when Batman and
Mm-hmm.
Tommy, I forgot the name of the guy who's actually Hush, Tommy.
Yeah, I'm blanking too, but
Yeah. So the Jeff Loeb showed a flashback where when these Bruce Wayne and Tommy are like youngsters, little
mm-hmm.
kids, and they would see Green Lantern fighting some of the Golden Age villains and
Yeah,
so forth.
yeah,
And next thing
yeah.
you know, I read the same thing here in the black and white series. Okay, you mentioned
I
that.
hadn't read Hush at that point, so I was a little unaware of it
Okay, okay. Well,
at the
it's
time.
beautifully illustrated by
Mm-hmm.
Jim Lee,
Mm-hmm.
and the panels are done by Jeff Loeb. Now, there is this quite of a diversity when it comes to the personality of Alan Brennert. You mentioned that you liked Superman because of the family structure that was
Mm-hmm.
there and things like these. But at the same time, we find you writing some of the darkest characters
Mm-hmm.
that are there. And not only just the darkest characters, you also took up the opportunity to write Holy Terror,
Oh
an
yeah.
Elseworlds Batman story, which was nothing short of being some of the darkest stories ever written.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So I mean, it's like, I have this belief that when you think in a certain way, you end up, each and everything around you gets influenced in that particular direction. But
Mhm,
having the ability to juggle yourself from something very family oriented,
mhm,
something very Boy Scout thing, and
mhm.
then all of a sudden you come into the dark realm, if you will.
Yeah. Yeah.
This is just amazing for me. And how is it possible for you to be this way?
Well, I chose chose to do that quite, quite purposely. I, like everyone else, was just, knocked out by everything that Alan Moore did at DC.
Oh, okay.
His Superman stories, his, The Killing Joke. Alan sort of, if I sort of in the early '80s kind of advanced the characterization, in my stories a little bit more beyond what was being done at DC at that time. Alan just took it like light years from there. He
Right.
showed us all what you can do in comics. Unfortunately, a lot of other people copied him, and it were not as good as he was at doing it. But he did it brilliantly. The Miracle Man series he did was just a mind blower. So I thought, well, I want to show that I can do this too. I was talking to Mark Waid, who was my editor with this first. Mark, it was first Mark and then Denny O'Neil. And I just got this idea. We were talking about doing some sort of a science fiction or an alternate world. And what was, quite um, topical at the time was, separation of church and state,
Yeah.
which is unfortunately still very topical in the United States at the moment.
Right.
And so there was a very strong statement against or for the separation of church and state. And I did things in there that I didn't think DC would let me get away with. I mean, I had Bruce and Martha Wayne get assassinated by the Star Chamber because they were running an underground medical clinic that engaged in, quote, counter reproductive services, unquote. Uh, I thought for sure somebody was going to say, no, I'm sorry, you can't do that.
Roe
No,
v. Wade.
Roe v. Wade, yes, yes. And so again, sadly relevant today. DC should bring it out in a new edition or something and just say, hey, still relevant. So yeah, so I had very dark stuff in there, but it was sort of necessary for the story, because I wanted Batman of that world to be sort of the biggest hope for that world. And of course that's encapsulated in the in his discovery of the Green Man, who I referred to, hoping people would think I was referring to either Martian Manhunter or Green Lantern. And then turned out to be Superman with kryptonite poisoning. So I wanted that. I knew I had to kill off a lot of superheroes. My friend Rob Kelly will never forgive me for doing what I did to Aquaman. But it was necessary. It was necessary. I needed the other characters to fall in order for Batman to rise. And so it was both necessary for the story and also something that I wanted to try my hand at.